Hello, and welcome back to the world of Wysteria. We will now conclude chapter 36 with part 3, and this is a rather short part. Okay, Wysteria, part 3. So, in ancient times, said Will, putting this together with what he'd learned from Jeremy in their previous conversations, it would have taken less energy for beings like Iris and Alicia to appear. Indeed, Jeremy replied. Energy, said Emily. I'm not sure I understand. Will looked at Jeremy, expecting him to explain. But Jeremy extended an open hand toward Will, gesturing that he was welcome to answer her. Well, as I understand it, Will began, anything is possible, but the more something conflicts with the natural order of a particular world, the less probable it is, the less likely it is to happen. And the less likely it is, the more energy it takes to bring it into being. I see, Emily responded. Will then glanced again at Jeremy to gauge his reaction. Succinctly put, said Jeremy, smiling to himself as he took another long drag from his pipe. What about demigods? Asked Will. Even in a world where the gods were more present, did divine beings actually mate with humans? Yes, said Jeremy. There were and are such beings. That is not to say that all humans who are said to have divine parentage truly did. It was common to confer such a pedigree on any larger-than-life individual, particularly by later generations. Of course, for the reasons we have discussed, semi-divine progeny, though always rare, are much rarer today. But gods and humans are different species, Will pointed out. How would that work biologically? Jeremy chuckled. That I do not know, and hence cannot explain, he said. Are there ghosts? Emily asked. Ghosts, said Jeremy, looking surprised, if not confused, by her question, which seemed to come out of the blue. If there are fairies and gods and guardian angels, she said, explaining her train of thought, are ghosts real as well? Ghosts, he pronounced deliberately. The apparitions that people witness and call ghosts may be various things. In some cases, I believe, they are beings from other dimensions that slip through the boundaries, either by accident or intent. Or they may be from our own world, quite human and quite alive, but from another time. And sometimes it is we who cross into their worlds or their time. But are there real ghosts, actual spirits of dead people, she said, narrowing her question. By that definition, some might say that I am a ghost, he answered with a smile. Will couldn't help interrupting at this point. What happens when someone dies? He asked bluntly. Jeremy leaned his head back in the chair and folded his hands on his lap. Ah, yes, he said. The crux of the matter. Are you familiar with the writings of Professor Einstein? Those that pertain to motion and the movement of time? He is, Emily quickly answered. Yes, said Will. It came up once while we were discussing why time is accelerated or expanded during our dreams. Emily explained that we slow down, which causes time to speed up. Very good, said Jeremy. That should make it much easier. It was a brilliant insight on his part, the connection between motion and time. The faster an object moves through space, the slower it moves through time. A simple concept, really, once it was recognized. A perfect example of an adventurous traveler forging a new path and finding a hidden truth in the wilderness of possibilities. But according to what Emily told me, you've taken it a step further, said Will. There's nothing in Einstein's theory that says time can speed up, that an object can move slower than at rest. If it's true, wouldn't he have been able to see it in the mathematics? A good question, Jeremy replied. I don't know the answer. I am not a mathematician. Perhaps he wasn't looking. But when I encountered his theory, I realized that if the fundamental concept were extended, it would explain much of what I was beginning to understand about the dreaming mind. As I assume you know, his theory proposes, entails, an upper speed limit, a speed at which time stops. If I were moving at that speed, then from my point of view, I would be traveling infinitely fast, because I could travel any distance in no time. But no matter how far I traveled, or for how long, according to clocks or calendars on Earth, I would experience nothing, for time would be frozen. Now, he continued, if I were to take my reinterpretation of the theory to its logical conclusion, what do you think would be the result? What do I think? Will responded. I don't know. If I were traveling infinitely fast, said Jeremy, restating the equation, time would stop, would move at an infinitely slow speed. Yes. Will nodded that he understood. And if my motion were infinitely slow, then time would move infinitely fast, Will cautiously concluded. Jeremy grinned. Exactly, he replied. But what does that mean, Will asked. What happens when time moves infinitely fast? Think about what happens when you fall into the slower dreaming state, he said. You experience hours of time here, while only minutes have passed in the waking world. If your mind descended into an even slower state, you would experience days or weeks in those same minutes. And if your mind, your soul, reached that state of infinite stillness, you would experience an eternity. Thus, in the moment of your death, you live forever. Jeremy then leaned forward in his chair and added casually, in theory, And that concludes chapter 36. And we will return with chapter 37.